deep critical thinking. And it's like I don't believe that there's one end.
Yeah.
For such a diverse, like infinite place, there isn't one finite option or end or cul-de-sac to where you get with thought. That this is what God is.
Sure. But even despite that, even putting that aside, the fact that there are so many human beings who can look at the universe and they can come to certain conclusions regarding the universe, they have different interpretations of the universe.
They do.
Ultimately, it doesn't negate the fact that those fundamental laws I spoke to you about, that I told you about, those truth claims that they make, they cannot do so without actually affirming those fundamental laws, those basic truths that I was trying to impress upon you.
Yeah, you need to go, we agree on that point, that you need to go through a certain process.
Exactly.
And then there's certain rules that you need to apply to make sure that your logic is rational. I agree.
So those fundamental truths that I spoke to you about.
You have the first one you told me, it's the rule of
non-contradiction.
Non-contradiction.
So these rules are going to push you to the understanding that there has to be a creator.
I think that's where we disagree.
Well, if this creator wasn't there, it would be a case of chance and probability being the cause of bringing the universe into existence.
Wait, repeat that. What do you mean?
So chance and probability is a mechanical cause, if you will. Chance and probability, things just being rolling the dice, rolling a seemingly infinite number of dice in order to account for the complexity of the universe.
Okay, yeah.
The probability factor of rolling 10,000 dice in order to account for a thing coming about that's extremely complicated, like for instance you're playing without or your mobile phone, the chances of those dice all landing a 6, 10,000 dice all landing a 6 to kind of explain the complexity of something is so improbable, it's so improbable that you can literally take it as an impossibility.
Okay, that it won't roll a 6.
Yeah, because chance doesn't have volition. Chance
doesn't have a will, it's just randomized.
It's just randomized things that occur. And those randomized things, they occur through causes anyway.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about the universe and it coming into existence, it was brought into existence by this being that implanted within the universe certain fundamental laws. Like, for instance,
the law of non-causality.
No. The laws that are programs that allow the universe to turn out the way it did.
Yeah.
So, for instance,
like guidelines.
Precisely. Like we're told by the scientists that there are 4 fundamental forces: the nuclear, the gravity, the electromagnetism, the nuclear one being the weak and the strong force. The 4 fundamental forces, they tell us, were required to be so finely tuned and for them to interact with each other in such a way that had they been slightly out of sync, then they say that either the universe would have turned out inert, or it wouldn't have started out to begin with.
The universe is all too perfect for not to have a creator.
Exactly.
That's what you're getting to.
So what that tells us is that this creator must have certain attributes. I'll give you an example. You and I, we have attributes, right?
Yeah.
We have power, we have the means of being able to move, will, which we call will, knowledge, wisdom, etc.
There's things inherent to human beings.
And not just human beings, these attributes are inherent to things that exist, full stop.
So just anything living?
Everything that exists.
You're saying like that?
Not just living.
An object. That tripod has a will?
No. That tripod has attributes. It doesn't necessarily have to have will. It has its own unique attributes. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
That tripod, you flick it, it's hard. You can give a name to these attributes.
You can.
The attribute for that tripod is that it is hard.
And
you can say it's metal.
Yes.
It's black.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. It has characters, it has qualities.
Exactly. There's nothing in existence except that it must be qualified of attributes. Give me anything from creation, an object that exists outside the mind, except that I will tell you that
for it to exist, it needs to have attributes. It can't exist with no attributes.
Precisely.
That's nothing.
Precisely. There's nothing there.
Are you to the point that because we have that the universe has attributes, therefore that's an extension, a representation of its creator, which therefore is like the Allah.
Go on.
Is that and therefore like
more than that? That this being has attributes.
Yeah.
If we have attributes, and those attributes point to, for instance, our sophistication.
Sure.
So the more simpler the object is, the less attributes it has. The more complicated it is, the more attributes you can apply to that thing.
So you're saying that there's causality between the amount of attributes something has and the complexity it is?
You can make that inference. And I would also say that the attributes that we, for instance,
I don't think it's complete, but yeah, it definitely has. There's definitely some sort of correlation.
Yeah.
I don't think it's causality, it's correlation.
One of the ways that we can determine as human beings that we have attributes and that we live is through those attributes. We live because our attributes point to us having an existence.
Yeah.
And that existence is a particular type of existence.
Yeah.
That existence points to us being able, for instance, to live in a way contrary to that bin, for instance, living.
Yeah.
We can think at the abstract level.
We can.
A bin can't.
Yeah, there's like ways to prove that you're alive. There's
Yes.
like your senses show, you know,
Exactly.
the senses just show you the ability to communicate, you have the ability to free will, independent thought.
Precisely.
Those things, yeah.
Precisely. Now, if that's true of us,
Yeah.
how about the one that brought the entire universe into existence?
Well, like, I'd say this, right, and this is using like a religious framework, that even though we have those abilities, attributes to think deeply, I think, as you say, we're confined by our senses. That was one of your original points.
Yeah.
I think if God is such a complex creature due to its having infinite attributes,
Yep.
that we simply can't frame or understand what that God is through our logical senses and perceptions.
Very good.
It's probably a bit too more complex than this.
Very, very
It's
good.
like a goldfish trying to understand quantum physics.
Yeah, I mean, one of the verses in the Quran in which God says that there's nothing like God. There's nothing like God.
You'd hope not.
Why? Because the universe is so unimaginably complicated
Yeah.
that the one that brought the universe into existence,
Has to be
you can only imagine how much more incredibly complicated that being is. Not complicated in the sense that there are parts to it, because that's an assumption. We don't know how God is in terms of his essence.
Yeah.
So since we cannot know God's essence,
Yeah.
we can only appreciate his attributes through his creation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
He's kind of taking me off the big card.
No, but does that make sense?
Repeat it.
So,
Yeah.
given that we don't know who God is,
Yeah.
we can only appreciate God's essence and his attributes through the
Prescribed
byproducts,
text. Yeah, through the creation,
Through
like
the
the Bible,
creation.
the Torah, the
through
Quran.
us, through the creation,
Yeah.
and also through the message that human beings have said that
Can I ask
he's
you a quick
revealed.
question?
Yeah,
And
go
because
on.
I did religious things, right? If God is if God is all knowing, all good, all creation, and we believe, right, through the monotheistic religions, that these religious texts are, it goes right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Torah was the original one, and then the Bible was the evolution, and then the Quran is
The Torah was revealed to Moses.
Yeah, yeah. And then Jesus came and he was a good prophet in Islam's eyes, but wasn't the perfect. And the Quran is the final and completed version, right?
Yep.
If God is all knowing,
Yep.
why did he pick literature, which is such a... Everyone gets their own meaning out of literature. I could read the same book as you could read the same book as me, and we both have completely different interpretations of it. If they are all knowing, why did they pick such a convoluted and like hard to distinguish out of one, like hard to distinguish one solid meaning, rather than actually coming down? I'm not saying like I don't believe in God because I don't see it. I think that's not a good.
That's a good question.
I think, but why literature?
Yeah.
The literature, it's so indistinguishable from each
Yeah,
other.
yeah. It's a good question. The answer's quite long, so if you have a bit of patience and just bear with me, I'll try and break things down.
Yeah, but that's specific questions. Why a book?
I heard your question. I'm going to get to it.
Perfect.
The issue here is follows. We as human beings, we think at the rational level.
Yeah.
We can think at the abstract level. So God is going to communicate with mankind through language.
Yes.
There's no other way of God communicating through us and being able to
We can
prove
communicate through
truth.
revelation. Isn't that how Muhammad got it? It was through dreams?
Through revelation, meaning through a communicative process. So we believe that all the prophets and messengers,
Yeah.
they were sent their inspiration, their revelation through words.
It was, tell me I'm wrong, it was Angel Gabriel.
Angel Gabriel.
Who came down to Muhammad and spoke to him.
Exactly.
But there's a difference between like language vocally
Yeah.
and language like
Spiritually.
semantically through book. Like written language versus oral language, there's a difference. And it's a lot easier
How's that difference?
because if I say to you, well, firstly, oral is finite. Once it is said, it is done, unless I repeat it. And then in text, it can be studied more because it exists longer. Therefore, it can have more opinions on it, and it extends past its original meaning because it gets refined, broken down. Scholars look at it. It gets extended. Understanding gets more deeper. Compared to something, if I say to you, it's pointed at you specifically, and once I said it, it's over.
So when the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, the circumstance of the Prophet Muhammad was that he was an illiterate man.
Yeah.
So when he received the revelation, he dictated what he was taught by Angel Gabriel.
Yeah.
When he dictated that, his companions, those of them who could read and write, they wrote it down verbatim in his presence. So the Quran is a unique book in that it is a public book that it is by the people. It is through Prophet Muhammad. It is for the people, and you could say it is by the people.
Literally.
Yeah. So the Quran was. So the Quran. Sorry about that.
I know. Just like.
So the Quran was written by the people around Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
And therefore the Quran was. The Quran was.
That's really blasphemous.
I know.
Why?
She does that all the time.
Does she?
Yeah, she does.
You hear every week?
I try and be here every week.
That's so sick. That's so sick.
When you believe in something, you want to share it.
And that's valorant.
And if a person goes home with a little less ignorance, a little bit more information, I've done my job. You know what I mean? But anyway.
Yeah.
So when the Quran when the Quran was actually dictated.
Why do you have 6 mics?
I have no idea. Don't ask me.
Sorry.
I'm a puppet here.
No.
So when the Quran was actually dictated, it was written down and memorized by the companions of Prophet Muhammad.
To answer you, because normally we know him, we have his number, yeah?
Yeah.
If we put in you, sometimes they go and we lost our mic.
I promise you, I'm not running away with the mic. I can promise you that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So one of the unique things about the Quran, it was memorized and written down during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad in its entirety. And the Quran was actually memorized by tens of thousands of people during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Quran was actually there during the Prophet's time, and it has remained exactly the same, word for word, letter for letter, dot for dot.
Yeah.
And we can actually prove that. It's an incredible phenomenon where if you go to any of the mosques around the world, you will find an imam or a person there who has memorized the entirety of it. You know the Muslims, You know the Muslims, they fast during the month of Ramadan.
Yeah.
The Quran, the month of Ramadan is known as the month of the Quran. The Muslims are encouraged to come together in the mosque in the evening, for instance.
Like Fridays.
No, just on Fridays.
Every day.
During the month of Ramadan, we're encouraged to literally read the Quran as much as possible. Because during that month, that is when the Quran was revealed for the first time.
Yeah, it's not a celebration right now.
It's like a celebration. It's a spiritual celebration.
We have a massive Muslim community in Sydney, and we had these night markets.
Right.
And then we had like one of the scholars come out and be like, it's not like Christmas, it's not like that, it's not some sort of like massive festival. It's more like it's more spiritual and holy than that.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. And
So,
it was like a big thing.
Yeah, but this is more like a spiritual holiday, spiritual party, if you will, where we all come together in prayer.
Yeah.
You might have seen the Muslims pray. They're very, very they go completely silent, and they're led by one man, and that man is usually the one who's the most knowledgeable of the Quran.
He like almost like sings the Quran.
He recites the Quran in a melodious voice.
Yes. That's the way to put it.
Yeah. So when he's reading the Quran, he does it from memory, the entirety of it. This is 6,200 and something odd verses.
In Arabic.
In Arabic. But when no human being, no imam is fallible. Is infallible. He makes mistakes.
Yeah.
People will become confused. But here's the thing, here's a phenomenon. Go to any mosque and you'll find Muslims behind him who've also memorized the Quran. One or two or three of them will immediately jump in when he's made a mistake and correct him.
It's really incredible.
And this tradition extends back over 1,400 years, right the way back through the companions of the Prophet.
And they all have mics so they can they can do it?
No, they just shout it out. The people just immediately behind will say, the imam will make a mistake and they'll correct him, and then he'll correct himself and then carry on reciting.
Oh, okay.
And this goes back to who? The Prophet Muhammad. This is how he taught people. So the phenomenon is incredible. So this is how we know for certain that the Quran is the word of God, and that it is being preserved for the Muslims, unlike the other books out there that were never in the hands of the people. They were in the hands of the elite. So for instance, the Bible was written after Jesus left the earth.
Yeah, it was like it's like comprised over 600 years.
It's comprised of 27 books.
Yeah, I know, but like it was written over 600 years.
Yeah, exactly. So what does the Quran bring? It brings this understanding that the revelation that was communicated to us, we know for certain it's from God, or through Angel Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad. So look, you asked me about the communicative process,
yes, I did,
right?
I did.
So I haven't forgotten the question.
Yeah.
So the Quran itself came with what's known as laws and regulations of how we're supposed to behave in life. In fact, it came to tell us the best way that we can actually exist in life, the best possible way that we can be as human beings, both individually as well as collectively. So if you want to sum up Islam, it's as follows. Islam is an establishment of rights. The rights between human beings, how we're supposed to behave between ourselves, but the most important right, how we're supposed to behave with the one above.
Yeah. How do we lead a holy life?
And that those rights are prioritized. So the most important right, in fact, there's a verse in the Quran that we know as being the final testament of the Messenger of God, Muhammad.
Yeah.
You know when you write a final testament, right?
Like a conclusion.
Like an inheritance, right?
I hope not too soon.
Yeah, well, we hope not, right? But we're going to all die very soon, right?
Pardon?
We're going to die very soon.
Are we?
We're not going to live forever.
No, we're not going to live forever, not very soon. Scared me there.
I could be soon.
You know what? I've reached, how old are you?
I'm only 21.
20-ish? Okay, I'm closer to 50.
Yeah.
At 21, I thought I was going to live forever. I would have probably said the same thing that you just said there. But when you've had a certain number of children, and when you know you've gone over the hill, you know that there's only one thing waiting for you.
I knew that now, but the difference is I hope not very soon. And I hope the same for you.
And we hope the same for you as well.
Thank you.
Right? The point, however, being that the laws that Islam came to teach, it prioritized these laws.
Yeah.
And it prioritized this through this verse that the Prophet Muhammad was described as his final inheritance, his final will to mankind.
His message.
His message.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting one. And the verse begins as follows. It says that, come, let me recite unto you. How many marks is that, mate?
6, 7.
I dare not look down.
Show you the action. Oh my God.
It begins as,
Yeah.
let me recite unto you what your Lord has forbidden you from. And the first and most important right is the right of God. It says that you do not associate partners in the worship of God.
What does that mean?
It means that in Islam we've been given a purpose in life.
Yeah.
That collective purpose is as follows. It says, God says in the Quran, I have not created jinn, which is an alternate form of life. You know, you heard of the genie. You know the genie when you rub the lamp and the genie
like
comes out?
Aladdin, yeah.
Like Aladdin, right? That Aladdin is literally from the concept of what the Arabs held, an alternative form of life like the angels known as jinn. What might be equivalent to ghosts or poltergeists in the West.
There's only the real tangible world, and that's the only form of life.
There's this world, and this world, according to the Islamic tradition, there are
So there is there's like a spiritual world. Is that what we said?
Exactly. There's
Okay.
created communities that God has created. For instance, the angels, human beings, and also what are known as the jinn.
And aren't they bad?
Some of them are bad. They're like us. They have free will. Some of them are good. Some of them are evil.
And they're invisible to us.
They're invisible to our eyes.
Yeah.
Just like God is invisible, the angels are invisible. But we believe in them just like we believe in God. God has given this information to us. We have faith in that. So the verse says, He did not create jinn nor mankind to do what? Except to worship God. So this worship is a worship of gratitude. That we recognize as that this being brought us into existence. And the least thing that we can do, Alex, is say, thank you, God. Thank you to be gracious. Because we're gracious to our mother and father.
As we should.
As we should. I don't need to tell you as one of those fundamental truths, the fitrah. Remember I told you about the fitrah, the primordial state that every child is born upon?
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you, for instance, that, Alex, you know instinctually that you owe your mother certain fulfillment of rights that she has over you. She brought you into this world.
So I then owe her stuff.
Yeah, you owe her something, right?
I don't think it's transactional.
Well, look, think about it like this.
Sure.
Instinctually, if someone gives you something, you're going to say thank you.
Yes.
You're not going to slap them across the face or be rude to them.
But that's because I follow the social code.
The social code is something, Alex, that irrespective of time and locale, whether you're living in the middle of a jungle and you're described as a primitive barbaric tribe,
Yeah.
or whether you're living in the most advanced civilizations, Alex, everyone recognizes that if human beings come together,
Yeah, we're cordial.
we're cordial because otherwise it's not in our best interest.
So that comes with a certain level of development, and it also comes with a certain level of peace and respect and understanding. But
It's more than that, Alex.
So you argue that there's an inherent code in us that makes us respectful.
Respectful. We have to be respectful. Why? Because
Well,
why?
I don't know if I agree with that, because
Alex,
I've met so many people that are disrespectful.
No doubt. But they're the exception to the rule. I'm talking about the rule here. When do you have a wife or a girlfriend?
No.
Okay, so when my wife and myself we came together,
Yeah.
instinctually we knew that there were unspoken rules that all human beings, when they come together to cooperate, whether you're in a business venture, whether you're a husband and a wife,
Yeah.
whether you're a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever, right?
I think that's due to the social code, not due to a biological rule.
No, but that's what I'm trying to get across to you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Even the atheists that recognize this biological rule. They say, love for yourself what you love for others.
Yeah, be respectful.
Be respectful. The reason why that is, Alex, is because God has implanted within us the concept of justice. And justice is defined as putting everything in its rightful place, such that...
So I don't agree, because you don't see a baby walking out talking about justice.
I'm talking...
If it's inherently like in them,
Yeah.
then they would be representing and accentuating that feature, that biological code from birth.
Yeah, we wouldn't be talking about a baby. We would be talking about people who can can tell the difference between. They've reached a stage of maturity where they can tell the difference between right and wrong.
I think I disagree with you. I think those are features of society rather than features of humanity.
Okay. Children, whether they live in in an Eskimo, whether they're part of a
even
small
like,
community,
it's an independent, like uncontacted
exactly,
tribe.
a tribe in the middle of a jungle. You go
Yeah.
to their children cooperate. They don't steal and lie. Instinctually, human beings don't lie against each other.
Yeah.
They cooperate because they immediately learn from each other that if I lie and steal, like for like,
There's consequence.
there's
Yeah.
consequences for that. And it's
Yeah.
in my best interest to maintain cordial relations with my brother and sister, whether they're 3 or 4 or 5 years old. You learn this. You
It's
learn this as you go
beneficial.
along.
Yeah.
But you know what? Those things are planted within us because babies and children, they don't inherently lie. Lying is actually taught human beings. I'll give you an example. It's a good example
No,
that I like
that's
to
actually
give.
not true. Because I do psychology, right? And we look at like when do humans start to gain concepts? So there's like the identity, like the thing about the identity of like the theory of like personal self.
Self and identity, yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like they all like object like I forgot what it's called, but if there's objects here, they know it's there. But if I place it around the corner,
Yeah, you know why that's...
they stop thinking that it exists, right? And there's a certain one where it's like delayed gratitude. So if I put the marshmallow in front of the child, and I go, okay, if you don't eat this, right, you get, and then I come back, you get 2 marshmallows, exactly. And they found out that a child from 3 doesn't have the cognitive ability to be able to lie, but from 4 to 5, especially in young boys, they do have that cognitive ability to lie, and they lie because they see the benefits of lying. We don't do things, as you said, we do things because it's benefiting. I see that it's benefiting you to be respectful to me, vice versa, right? We do things, we repeat actions based off, it's like the stick and carrot method. Because we see that it helps us, it gains us, it gives us stuff, we continue to do that. It's beneficial. But if we get punishment, it's not. And not lying, if we realize that it's beneficial to lie in certain contexts, we continue to do it.
We do that. If it's if it leads to, you see what you've done here is you've actually whittled down the point very nicely. When a person lies and they know they're going to get away with a lie,
if it's beneficial.
Because it's beneficial to them.
Yeah.
It's what's known as the utilitarian approach. Sure. You're going to use it as a means of utility for yourself.
Yes.
Because you found that it's in your best interest to do so.
Yes.
But now multiply that and ask yourself, if everyone began to lie en masse, would that be good for society or would it be detrimental?
Terrible.
Exactly. So we know that although there may be a limited utility towards us lying, if we carry on lying, there are going to be consequences.
But that's like the ancient brain thing. Like we only think what's in front of us. We only have the cognitive ability to see what's in front of us, not the actual extended consequence of our actions. That's why like climate change exists.
No, but
because we want
exactly. But I'm talking about look to the not to the exception, the extreme exception of the rule. I'm asking you.
That's the world.
No, I'm talking about look to the rule. The world that we live in. This world that we live in.
Yeah.
whether you go to America, the greatest civilization on the earth, quote unquote, or whether you go to, or whether you go to a primitive tribe, right? They have a concept of justice to the point where if you break the laws that they've developed over a period of time, the laws, they are there to facilitate goodness, not to facilitate lying.
I think it's more complex than that. I think that's rather a question of, okay, you're saying, so if we...
Alex, I'm saying, think about it from the beginning of time until now. Exactly. But I'm trying to get you to understand that there is a fundamental law that human beings are compelled to implement.
There are. But I think we disagree on what that law is.
Yeah, but the point here is that those fundamental laws of mutuality, they are there and they are implemented by societies that are huge in number, as well as people who live in, who begin a relationship, like a husband and a wife. They do so all sharing the same concept, that the utility over the long-term period, not the exception to the rule, the utility over a long period of time is that we be mutually beneficial towards each other. And mutual benefit doesn't occur through lying. Because if I begin to find out that my partner is lying, I can never know when that person is telling the truth. So it could be that, you know what, that person may be trying to be good towards me, but I'm always going to be suspicious. Now imagine multiplying that and it becomes a community. Well, a community of people who are constantly second guessing each other. Are we ever going to be are we ever going to
we won't be able to function as a society.
No, we're not going to be able to function.
But I don't think that mutual benefit, I think it does. I don't think we think to the group level that much. I don't think we see the consequence of our actions as...
No, but we do, Alex, because
we don't, because we wouldn't have gotten ourselves in a situation like climate change, exactly. Because if we used your logic to think, we would have understand the consequences of our actions time and time again, right? We would have listened to the studies. We would have seen the atoms are melting. We would have stopped what we were doing because of the future consequence.
That's a very good point. Let me try and address that.
I think.
And I'll tie that in with the concept.
I think we think about the present benefit and the present consequence. I don't think we have the cognitive ability, both individually and societally, to understand the collective consequence. I think we think, how can I help myself? And how can I help the people I love?
Okay.
How can I benefit maybe max 10 people? I think we care about our group, our tribe, and anything against that, we like to think we care, but in realistic thing, it's not really. And then think about the homeless issue.
Right.
Like, we see so many homeless people. How many people don't, including me, including other people, would just rather not think about it because they're not in that close peer. And I think that's the inherent rule of humanity. I think we do things that benefit us, and they benefit our peers around us, but mostly us. I think we're self-serving creatures, unfortunately. And I think that's the inherent rule. Rather than being collective, and that we do things that are quote unquote moral for mutual benefit, for combined benefit.
If that was true, you would have absolute anarchy and pandemonium across the face of the earth.
Well, we're getting close.
We are getting close, but again, I'm asking you to think about mankind not in the here and now, in the present, as though we're somehow more important than the far greater amount of time that the human beings have lived on this earth.
No, but
our ancestors...
They've had calamities, they've had catastrophes, they've had situations.
You're right,
we repeat the cycle where we destroy ourselves.
We do, but that's only because of the fact that we are limited creatures.
Yeah, exactly.
That are inherently...
short-sighted.
Not short-sighted.
Sure.
We make mistakes. That's one of the aspects of being human. No one's saying that human beings are not going to fall short.
No, we do.
The question is whether we fall short and we continue to remain falling short. We don't. When we fall short, whether we're an individual or whether we're part of a family unit or whether we're part of a community unit or whether we're part of a society, we fall short and we rectify things. How do we know, for instance, that we rectify things? Because let's take the grand example that you gave, which was the climate change. Climate change, you could argue that climate change is something that human beings are beginning to wake up to. There is a conscious effort globally that's taking place.
Paper straws, line bikes.
Precisely. So what took place in the 80s is no longer the case as it right now.
As it is
you
now.
Go to McDonald's and they've changed their paper straws their plastic straws to paper straws. So it shows that collectively human beings do implement that fundamental law that if we do not do things to stop what's destroying our planet,
Yeah.
our planet is going to come to an end. Where does that instinctual, that notion of
That's survival.
recognition?
That's survival. That's like, I want to live.
No, but where does that survival instinctual concept come from?
That's in our biological code. I believe that our biological code is to survive and to reproduce.
Exactly. And that survival, what is it based upon? It's based upon mutual benefit. Because if we did not mutually come together and
Yeah.
recognize that if we don't stop the world being polluted, that we're going to destroy our own world,
Yeah.
I'm going back
It's
to what I
bad for
said.
all of us. Yeah.
And what was I saying in the beginning? This goes back to the fitrah.
The inherent rules.
The inherent moral
Yeah.
code that every human being has
What is it? It is
implanted
justice,
within them.
will.
Justice is as follows. It's defined as follows. Putting everything in its rightful place. To the point where if you try and take something and
Yeah.
you try and shove it into an area that it doesn't belong,
Yeah.
you're committing injustice. So imagine that's yours, right?
Sure.
You know that's yours, right? You brought it,
Yeah, I did.
right? So that belongs to you.
And then if you took it, that
Imagine I
means
took it. That doesn't belong to me. I have no right to take
Yeah.
that from you.
Yeah.
Now I don't need a law that exists outside myself for to know that I've done wrong, and for you
Yeah.
to tell me,
Yeah.
and for you to know that what I'm doing is wrong, because
Yeah.
it is something.
It's morally bad.
It's morally, internally implanted within you
Yeah,
and within me.
It's a moral code.
Exactly.
Well, that's like what we get taught in psychology is that there's like three inherent crimes. So whatever society you go to, if it's uncontacted, independent, any society you go to, it's stealing.
Yep.
If I steal from you, that's regardless of where it is, what it is, who it is, it's inherently bad. Murder,
Yep.
taking a person's life,
Exactly.
and sexual assault / rape.
Yep.
If you take someone's, if you do that, those are the three. Regardless of the people
Yeah.
who set those laws,
Yeah.
the people that commit those
Yeah.
laws, we as humans, there's something inherently in us which deems that immoral.
Exactly. So those inherent laws you can.
Those three, yeah.
Yeah, you can multiply them, and
But
you.
that's the end.
No, but you multiply them and have a look at the fundamental laws that we establish when we come together as a community and within a city, within a country.
Yeah, we
all
extend it.
share these laws. They're all an extension of those moral, ethical principles, those foundational moral and ethical principles.
Yeah.
Now, it may be the case that despite a society coming together and trying to implement those laws that are within our system codified,
Yeah.
our codified system, there may be rulers who stop us from doing that. Like, for instance, the people at the head of a global conglomerate known as, of an energy firm, that know that, you know what, if these people rise up against us, that our global business,
Yeah.
that's it comes
Like
to an end.
profit of the people, I agree.
So what they'll do then is try and suppress the people. But
Yeah.
that doesn't negate the fact that those moral laws are still being implemented by those people. They're trying to regain
Yeah.
what they recognize
Some
to
sort
be
of
inherent.
independence, yeah.
Yes. So I'm trying to get across to you this understanding that, and in fact the Quran actually speaks to this. It says, evil has appeared in the land and in the sea because of what the hand of human beings have earned, so that they may taste a portion of that evil and return back to God in repentance.
So we create evil, we realize that it's evil, and then we go back
And
to
then
our
we go
holy
back to
ways.
God. So in other words, the exception to the rule is
Evil.
evil.
So
The rule
everything is good, and then the exception is the evil.
exactly. And what is the concept of evil? It is.
I don't agree with that.
Well, let me try and break this down.
Sure.
Look at the way God, if He exists, look at the way He's allowed human beings to exist.
Yeah.
We human beings, all of us, we have so many blessings, quote unquote,
Yeah.
that we have in life. We breathe in the majority. There may be extreme exceptions to the rule. We
have movement.
love.
Yeah.
We have mercy.
We do.
We have all these inherent characteristics, right? We have all these inherent characteristics. So these are blessings, and the exception to the rule is that there are few people in life who try and go against these rules.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah. That guy kind of took me off a bit.
Yeah, no worries. So the concept here is that all of us, we have these blessings that we have around us.
Yeah, I agree.
Evil is an exception to the rule.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that not evil, but like negative things like pain,
That
suffering.
is, so let me just put it like this.
Sure.
Evil is the absence of good. So a good is something that is beneficial.
That's like saying like pain is the absence of like sadness is the absence of happiness.
Yes. You can,
I think they exist in their own right. I think it's not like black and white. I think it's more like they exist.
okay,
in their own
maybe
right.
the word evil maybe is you're finding it a bit jarring. So let's go with the world that you're.
I hear that religious term a lot, where it's like I forgot what paradox it is, but it's like how could God exist if evil exists, right? Like if it's an all-knowing God.
Yeah, that's predicated on the understanding that God is all good, but we don't believe that. We believe that God is just, and God, who is just, He placed everything in the universe in its rightful place.
Okay. So everything has a
purpose, because we don't believe that this world is a world of absolute good or absolute evil. This is a world, our scholars have told us and Islam tells us, it is a world of a mixture of good and evil, but the purpose behind the universe being created fits God's purpose. Because, for instance,
to a point,
if this universe was all good, we human beings, we wouldn't know what evil is, because we wouldn't have a means of being able to measure goodness by it.
Okay.
We would be like automatons.
Okay.
There's no concept of the opposite, for instance, of light. If there was just light and there's no darkness, would we know what light is if we didn't have anything? No.
You need a point of reference.
Exactly. So in the Quran, God says, and we have created everything in pairs so that they may reflect.
Yeah.
What is God drawing our attention to? That God has created this universe dualer. That in the world,
it's like bimodal. Yeah.
Why? Because that allows us to understand the concept of justice. Without the opposite, there would be no means of us being able to know what good is in order to establish justice, what evil is in order to establish justice. So this points to the fact that the creator who brought the universe into existence, it has certain fundamental attributes that are predicated on justice as well.
Yeah.
God is all just. He's the one who created good, and he brought evil into existence, and he created it.
Okay.
Do you mind if I say something?
Go for it.
So the thing is, like in Islam, like the God is the first one, you know. So that means He does whatever He wants. Everything that you see is all His. Like before everything existed, there had been God. God is the first one. If you took a look at it into a long way, and if you have because we all our minds might be limited, you know. If you think about it. It's all true. Like the God is the first one. He created everything. Like He is all the good and evil. If you can't say,
it's all an extension of God.
You're gonna end up into the idea that God is the first one. He does whatever He wants. If He wants to punish people, if He wants to make evil, God said that if He wanted these human beings, if He wanted, He would have given guidance and He would have made everyone believer. Like He said that in the Quran.
In the Quran, God says that if He wanted to, He could have made you one community.
Yeah.
But God says that He does this out of His justice, meaning He creates human beings, they differ, so that then He can implement His justice.
Okay, so there's the believers and the non-believers.
Yeah, but check this point out.
Wait, let him finish this point.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you think about it, sometimes you might be like, okay, what is evil, what is bad, what is good, what is this, and what is pain and that. You're gonna come up to the thing that it is really God, He just created everything, because we all belong to God, you know. If you think about it, everything it is, you're gonna, if you use your intellect and use your knowledge and keep on thinking about it, you're gonna end up into that the God is the first, and He created everything exists God created it. So it's all His thing.
So there's a verse in the Quran where God says that He says, وَرَبُّكَ يَخْلُقُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَخْتَارُ. He says that your Lord, He creates whatever He wills and wishes. Now the verse begins as the following, your Lord. So what it's reminding human beings of is the following. If you recognize there is a creator, and that everything is therefore dependent upon this creator, it is God who therefore decides how the universe is. And then the verse continues and says, and they do not have any say in the matter. Why? Because if you recognize there is a creator, the question now isn't why did God create me, but the question now becomes for what purpose did God create me? Because the why cannot come into it. The why, you've already submitted yourself, and Islam means the ones.
To submit.
So you've already submitted yourself to the idea that there is a creator, a source of all things.
Yeah, and
obedience. So if this God is the source of all things, He's brought the universe into existence, we live.
What now?
What now is, what is my purpose now in life?
Yeah.
And that's where God communicates with mankind, because if this God exists, He is a God of attributes, incredibly powerful, incredibly knowledgeable. We would say
Yeah.
also incredibly loving, incredibly wise, but also all just.
Yeah, all just.
So meaning that people like Hitler are not going to get away with what they did. There are some people who turn away from God because they've been taught, oh, God is all loving. So if God is all loving...
So they believe since God is all loving, therefore they have impunity.
Exactly. So we say that no, we believe that God brought us into existence. If we as human beings recognize the concept of justice and we implement the laws of justice in this world, the one that brought us into existence, who gave us the intellect and the rationale to be able to know this, he knows us better than we know it ourselves.
It just seems so absolute for me. It's like, okay, this is God's way. He put you in here. Don't question, to submit. Okay, these are God's laws. Here's this. Don't wonder why. It seems something so logical and so rational. It seems also conforming and obedient. But it doesn't. But it is. Because it's like, okay, this is what it is. You submitted. Don't bat an eye.
I see where you're coming from.
And it's a bit like, in such like as you show, like you're very intelligent on these things, and you say there's a lot of scholars.
And believe me,
a lot of discourse around what is and what isn't, and where do you extend yourself. But at the same time, it's like it doesn't seem like an inherent human quality to have that utmost obedience, especially to something that tells us isn't visible. We didn't believe oxygen existed, air existed. We believe this is empty space due to its invisible nature, and then we discovered it and go, okay, there's something here. We don't believe. It's like the black swan paradox. It's like very close to like Australians because you didn't believe black swans could exist, and they went to Australia and they existed, and they go, wow, like, okay, maybe things that are in front of us, that aren't in front of us, can exist.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, have absolute belief in me, have absolute conformity, absolute obedience, but I'm not going to show themselves, and like, it just seems like that's not an inherent human quality. And if we're an extension of God, why did they make us scrutinizing, curious creatures, yet we're told to believe in something you can't scrutinize, but also is not present?
Okay, so Islam never says not to scrutinize.
But it's like the way you're presenting it is like to submit. Like
maybe that's my fault here.
Yeah.
Because he brought up the concept of God exists, so therefore we're supposed to submit to Him. I was trying to get across to you that once we reach that point in our evolution and our spirituality, and we recognize that God exists, and we come to a firm conviction that God exists, that has a profound impact on how we live life. It can only ever have a profound impact because if this God exists, and this is a God that has attributes of perfection, we know that the more perfect an attribute is implemented, the more praiseworthy the person who implements that attribute is. So for instance, take a judge for instance. We know that some of the greatest judges are those that are able to implement the attributes of justice in the most perfect way possible. Not the most perfect way, because no one's infallible. Everyone makes mistakes. But the best
judges are the best.
The best judges are the ones who implement
they can
the
infer
attributes.
Justice
Exactly.
Like,
and we praise them. We say, you know what?
As we should.
So the one, therefore, so in other words, here's a principle. It's a principle.
Yeah.
The closer we are to the establishment of the perfection of an attribute, the more praiseworthy that attribute is. So the being that brought the universe into existence, who is seemingly as perfect as you can get, because there's nothing beyond this being.
Couldn't.
His or her attributes, right? Its attributes, they have to be the most perfect attributes that we can conceive of.
Yeah.
So therefore, if we praise our mother and father when we're children and we're growing up, they say that, the mother and father, we're the apple of our mother and father's eye, but they're also like a god to us when we're young.
Yeah.
They're the only world that we have.
Yeah, like you think your dad's the strongest person in the world.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And then we go out in the world and we find that there are human beings who God has blessed with having an incredible intellect. They can think about their particular subject in a way far more better than other people, and we praise them. We give them Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, so people who are good at things, we give them praise.
We give them their due rights.
Yes.
Right? Their due worth.
In certain contexts.
In certain contexts.
Yeah.
Now, if that's true for the limited things, a fortiori, meaning applying this to the more perfect concept, the being that exists, that brought the universe into existence, that being is more worthy, the most worthy of us recognizing its perfection of attributes.
Isn't that not answering the question of why we praise a God? Like, isn't that answering the question of like, okay, if God's all perfect, then why does he need people to praise him?
Very good
Doesn't that
question.
answer that question?
So that verse I gave you.
What I'm saying, didn't you just answer that? Because it's like if because they are the best, they are perfect.
Yes.
Therefore, and then
They are the most worthy of praise.
Therefore they're worthy of praise.
Precisely.
And it extends itself.
And that concept that they are most worthy of being praised, we know amongst ourselves that, well, actually, let's go back to the, so I've given this concept to you, Alex.
Sure.
Essentially, Islam is a concept of rights, like I said before, the establishment of rights.
Yeah.
If you read the Quran and you read the prophetic Sunnah, which is the example of the Prophet Muhammad that's been left to us, you'll find that there isn't anything when it comes to the establishment of rights that he hasn't spoken about. So for instance, he's told us that verse which I recited to you, which, let me recite unto you what your Lord has forbidden you from, do not associate partners in God's worship.
Yeah.
And then it goes
Is
on.
that why you separate female and men in the mosque?
Yes, but then the verse continues and says,
Sure.
and be good to your mother and father.
Yes.
So literally, alongside the most important right that we human beings can think of, it immediately places who? Your mother and
your
father. I mean, it's an extraordinary phenomenon.
Do you reckon? I feel like it's inherent humanity to praise thy mother and thy father.
And yet there are people who today and before who are not respecting their mother and father according to the way God wants them to look after their mother and father. So for instance, there are people who say to their mother and father, pee off, or mum, get lost, or get out of there, right?
You get too crazy.
Listen to what the Quran says.
Yeah.
The Quran says, if this is the word of God, and God has communicated what our rights should be towards our mother and father, here's the standard, Alex. It says, and if one of them or both of them reach old age, extend a wing of humility over them, and do not say, oof.
Oof. What do you mean?
Forget a word, even an expression of disrespect.
Oh, so like be respectful.
Yeah, you know, like when some children nowadays they go, they kiss their teeth, right?
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of the Arabic word oof.
Oof. So if I'm saying oof to someone, that's
yep.
Really?
And exactly.
Really?
Yeah. And the
and my culture is like oof.
You should not even
that's
say
bad.
that.
Like,
that's very bad.
Yeah, you shouldn't even say that. Like.
So you can imagine. So you can imagine.
For your parents.
So you.
I don't use the word.
So you can imagine how you have a look at the way children behave today. How far, and I put myself in the category how I used to behave towards my mother and father.
Yeah, you're a father now. You probably say.
How we behave towards our mother and father. The word in Arabic is in the superlative of the language. It's not saying that you be the second best or the third best. It says ihsanan, the best that you can be to your mother and father. And then the verse continues and it says, and do not bury your children out of fear of poverty. Now this is in reference.
Do not bury your children.
Children out of fear of poverty.
Does that mean don't literally
bury them in the sands of Arabia. And why? Because the Prophet Muhammad came, the Arabs, unfortunately, because they had turned away from the rules of God, turned away from the true worship of God, they began to create their own limited man-invented concepts. So they came to the conclusion that a daughter is a liability and it is lesser than having a son.
You see that now.
You see that now in countries like in India, where it's an epidemic.
Yeah, like China has more men because of one child policy.
Exactly.
And you go rural. Like
Exactly.
A man can work the land better than a woman.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing like a massive amount of sex trade in like Southeast Asia.
Yep.
Because they had to find a wife.
And they just recently passed the law of euthanasia. That you can literally, when you want to choose to kill yourself, do whatever you want.
Isn't that? I was reading the newspaper. I was up in Manchester, and it was like suicide bombs and stuff.
The ball has been rolled. The first steps have been taken.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean that's a story for another day. Let me just go back to the fundamentals there, right?
Sure.
So the Arabs used to bury their baby daughters alive. So the Quran came and forbade this.
That's good.
And the Quran also says, and do not kill anyone for whom it is unlawful for you to kill unless upon justice. So Islam advocates for use of violence, but it has to be violence upon justice.
Yeah, like a consequence.
Yeah, like what's known as a just war theory.
What's a just war?
Just war theory.
Oh, like it's a just war.
Just
like it's
war.
a fair war.
Someone comes to attack you, someone comes to take away your homes and says, "Oh, this is my home now. Get lost," right? Like in that part of the world where an entire
we're in agreement.
civilization. Yeah. So this is what Islam came to teach, the establishment of rights. So Alex, what I've told you here, I'm hoping it makes complete sense. Like for instance, the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, he even gave the walkway its rights. He saw some of his companions just sitting there loitering on the road. So he went to them and he said, give the roadway its rights. And they said, O Messenger of God, how do we give the roadway its rights, right? He said, spread the salutations of peace. Meaning, you might see some of the Muslims, they'll say, when they meet each other, they'll say, Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, then you're wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum assalam. We're literally making supplication to God that, oh God, bless my brother, have mercy upon him. And he says, and may God
extend that mercy to you.
Extend that mercy upon my brother as well.
Oh.
So this is what he said about the right.
Can a non-Muslim say that?
Non-Muslims can say that. If you say that to me, I'll say wa alaikum assalam to you.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, likewise, the rights that animals have.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised that animals have incredible rights in Islam. So, for instance, the Prophet Muhammad, he said.
Yeah, like the. So like that's the halal, right? And the whole point of the halal is to kill the animal with the least suffering possible.
Yes.
But due to the older, it being written in the what? 480?
Yeah.
That when Muhammad came?
Yeah. Over 1400 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, I'm telling you about that. How come if it was really the most like halal way, like the most like non-pain killing, it like they do like pain indexes when they die, like in the abattoirs and everything. They do it in Australia quite a lot because we sell our beef like internationally.
I know you do.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love it as well.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. And like so, like a lot of my friends are like from these like abattoir families, and some of them like usually half the farm will be halal, and like a quarter will be like kosher, and a quarter will be like non-halal. And they did like research on like slitting the throat compared to like, isn't like there's no blood, they bleed them dry. And
you see, this is you've hit the nail on the head there.
It's like
by
it's
asking.
not, it doesn't have a technological like advancement, adaptation. It hasn't like fit the time.
Yeah.
Hasn't met up. Maybe it has.
Yeah.
Maybe it does, but it seems honestly that like. The modern methods that we have in Australia, which are like, we're such a bureaucratic country, to actually get something passed, it needs to go through a million checks and balances, a million filters. And the way that it is done now...
So what you're saying is the supply hasn't met the demand?
I'm saying that it hasn't really adapted, hasn't really evolved. And
so just to get back to what you said, there was a poignant thing that you said, which I want to touch upon. You said the least amount of pain.
It's about the least amount of pain.
But it's not about the least amount of pain for the Muslims.
What is it?
It's about the purity of the animal and our consumption of the animal.
Yeah.
So the consumption of the animal, we're saying that the animal needs to be slaughtered in a way that is the most pure for the Muslim, whilst also striking a balance in terms of the least amount of pain. The criteria isn't just about least amount of pain.
Yeah, okay.
Because if it was least amount of pain, we would be using the bolt method.
Yeah.
Just firing it in because apparently it causes the least amount of pain.
Yeah.
But when the Muslims have been told that if we're going to consume animals, it needs to be the purest way it's possible.
So subjective.
But that's where we have scientific research for this.
But there's a way to calculate and quantify purity.
Yes. So the way of quantifying that is through the amount of blood that's left in the animal, which carries the bacteria and viruses.
Bacteria is all throughout. Bacteria is all throughout.
No doubt. But we're trying to minimize that when we consume the animal.
Then you'd have to like cleanse every part of the animal. Like,
no, not necessarily.
Yeah, you do. Like
you've got to try and do it
on stuff. Like so, cysts can be in the muscle tissue.
So we do it to the best of our ability. We're not told in Islam to go to extremes in our religion.
Yeah.
To the point where you got to make sure that everything is being removed. Macroanalyze. Because if we start microanalyzing, we'll wear ourselves out. And Islam actually came to recognize that even in worship, we're told not to go to extremes in our worship. And there's a story to this, but I'll come to that in a moment.
Sure.
So when we're told to live in a particular way of life, we're told to keep the balance. So for instance, if we eat too much meat, we've been told that we're going to become ill.
Yeah.
If we don't have enough meat, we're omnivores. So us not having enough meat, it will have, in the long term, not for everyone, because certain people can live without meat and still be functional.
Vegetarian.
There are MMA fighters who've become world champions and they're vegetarians, right?
Yeah, that's pretty.
But they're the exception to the rule.
Yeah. So we need balance in our diet.
We need a balance in our diet.
I agree.
we need a balance in everything that we do. So when the Quran came and said that we can eat meat, it gave us the best way of slaughtering the animal.
I don't agree with that.
And we believe that slaughtering, it is based upon a balance between the purity and the harmfulness to the animal.
Yeah.
And in order to acquire to find the balance, the Prophet said, slice the animal's throat, but don't do it in front of another animal. And he explicitly said, because it will cause other distress towards the other, distressing the other animals.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. That it's nice. It's a balance between the purity of the animal towards the people, someone consuming it, the Muslim consuming it, and at the same time causing the least amount of pain.
Yeah.
I don't agree that draining the blood makes it pure. I think my conception is that the purity is a more spiritual thing, and that blood is impure, and because pathogens and microbes and deadly bacteria and viruses are transmitted through all means.
Yep.
Sneezing, there's vectors, mosquito, so many different means. And that the pain caused, I believe, is substantial and makes sense for the creation of the Quran. And if I pronounce that wrong, I apologize. Back when it was the advancement of what they understood then. But now, like we'd agree, if it was the least pain, it'd be the bolt method. It'd be a more technologically advanced method. So I just don't see how it's correct in that sense.
So you see, one of the things that what has allowed Islam to remain the way it is that there are certain fundamental areas that we cannot compromise on, and there are other areas that we can use technology, or we can use to adapt.
How do you decide
we can move.
between?
I'll tell you, we can move with the times. So, for instance, you spoke about how we need to adapt the slaughtering method to account for this to the many mouths that we need to feed, right?
Yeah.
Islam has already accounted for that.
Yeah.
So we have the stunning method. We can stun the animal and then we can slaughter it.
You can.
Yeah. But there are certain areas that we can't compromise on, and one of those areas is that we can't use the bolt method, because part of the way we've been told to eat the animal as our submission towards God is that we slaughter the animal in a particular way that is pleasing to God, not to ourselves.
It needs to fit God's lens.
It needs to fit the truth. And this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, which was that these fundamental truths, the way we live life, these are ultimately decided by God himself. So if Islam came as a complete way of life, which we believe it did, it tells us how we can live our life by submitting our will to the will of God. And in doing so, we will live the best version of ourselves. If the more we turn away from God, the more we'll begin to improvise, and the more mistakes that will creep into how we live life, and we'll begin to see those mistakes in life. And today, Alex, I believe that human beings who are turning more and more further away from spirituality and are becoming more and more moving more towards
immoral thing.
No, not just immoral, but to a non-spiritual way of life. Right?
I agree with that.
We're beginning now to see how society is breaking down. People are questioning their sexuality, people are identifying as animals, and things are only going to get worse.
I think that's an exception to the rule. I think.
Do you think they're going to learn from this and hopefully come back to the truth?
I don't think it.
Do you think it's an experiment?
I don't. I think so. Like England, like the West is the Anglosphere, the Westosphere, the West. It's individualistic as it gets. It's about me. It's about who you are. I think a pillar of it, that individuality is identity. And I think we're given the right and we're given the space and the expression to find out who we are and what's the correlated identity with who we are. I think that's an extension of that, because you do see like lower levels of LGBTQ and like that sexual preference and those things, which personally I agree with. I'm an ally to that. I think it's amazing. I think that in a city like London, the diversity of it, you can have a corner like here and talk about religious things, and down there's Pride Month, which we speak. I think that's incredible. I think it's diversity, but I think it's an extension of identity, and I think it's an extension of individualism, because it allows us to express ourselves. And I don't think it's immoral. I don't think gay people are immoral. I think they're because it exists independently from like influence. I think gay people so there's like the classic Native American third gender. where they believe that there was a third gender. And then in like where I'm from, Koori people, Indigenous Australians, there was also an understanding of a third gender. Someone that didn't have female or male soul, somewhere in the middle, and it's such a crucial aspect of relationships. And now we're looking to biological studies. Okay, well, if people are gay, right, and they don't reproduce, and reproduction is the main reason we live biologically, what are they here for, right? They don't have any offspring, they don't have any children. And it actually shows that communities with high percentage of LGBT actually have higher levels of connectedness and communalism because they look after children, they look after each other, they care about each other, they're pillars of the community. And I think it's inherently human that people aren't just heterosexual. And I think it's like the pushing of religion that kind of condemns it. And some horrible things have happened when it comes to, they are oppressed people.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic society that would limit that oppression, will allow self-expression and identity. And I think religion is when it comes to it shunning that and pushing that down is honestly a terrible thing.
Yeah. So one of the things that Islam actually teaches is that, like I mentioned before, it speaks about the rule rather than the exception. Human beings.
I don't think LGBTQ is an exception. I think it's a rule.
So the human beings right across the face of the earth, by and large, whether it's today or in the past, they've identified as heterosexual because there is a utility in heterosexuality that is implanted within the biological self.
There is.
So
I'm saying there's also utility to homosexuals.
Yeah, but that's the extreme exception of the rule.
I don't think it is. I think you see the exception of the rule as diversity. I don't think there needs to be a monoculture. I don't think there needs to be one thing. I think there's diversity. And I think that's an exception.
I understand where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But that has only been allowed to take place within the modern day era.
And I'm saying it hasn't, because in
the past,
the oldest living culture, which still exists today, is the Australian Indigenous culture. It has been around for 70,000 years. Continued heritage. Right?
Are you telling me that in that heritage, the exception to the rule was not heterosexuality?
No, I'm saying there was diversity.
No, I understand that.
And
but the diversity, was it a 50-50 diversity, or has it always been?
No, because the rule goes deeper than heterosexuality and homosexuality. The rule is attraction, and then the diversity happens. I believe, like in this context, maybe asexuality is the exception to the rule, having no attraction at all. But I think the rule is just sexual attraction itself.
Alex, if you go to the Aboriginal tribes, the vast majority of them, I can confidently say, are heterosexual.
I agree.
And I would also say that they've always been heterosexual. From time immemorial.
Probably majority of them have been.
If you go to the indigenous tribes, you will find from time immemorial they've always been heterosexual.
Not always,
you may
but
find
the majority has been always heterosexual.
Yeah. You may find that there are small exceptions where men have been attracted to other men and they've acted out their sexuality. But that doesn't deny the fact that what Islam is teaching is the rule, not the exception to the rule.
I know.
That's what I'm saying here.
I find that a bit too binary, that thinking.
No. Look, believe it or not, do you know that Islam also speaks about a third sexuality?
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
It's known as the hermaphrodites.
What?
The idea that the human being may be born, and they are born in a way where their biological development during the fetal stage has made them into such a state where they're not sure whether they're a male or a female.
No, I think hermaphrodites are intersex. I think it's like a biological thing rather than identity.
But that's an extreme exception to the rule. And so what Islam came to facilitate...
I just don't agree with the binary thing. And that's where we differ.
But the exception, what Islam came to facilitate was the natural law of the world. The law that God established His world upon. I don't think that can be denied. I think it's obvious that the vast majority of human beings, right throughout history, they weren't forced towards heterosexuality. It is a natural proclivity and a biological necessity.
It is the biological necessity. Like, if it wasn't heterosexual people, we wouldn't be having children. But I think, firstly, I disagree with this rule and exception sort of thing. I think it kind of makes like this assumption that there's a way and there's not a way. There's people who follow the rule and people who don't abide by that. I think people who are homosexual are following their sexual proclivity. I don't think it's a decision just like it's not for heterosexual people. And I think,
do you believe those decisions are right or wrong?
I believe that they don't have any moral. I think if you're not causing harm to anyone else, I think that it doesn't.
Let me rephrase the question.
If I'm not causing harm on someone, then
let me rephrase the question.
Sure.
Do you believe it's objectively right and wrong in relation to what God has established?
I think so. We're talking about the monotheistic God here, the Abrahamic God.
No, just God in general.
So yeah, like the one true God, alright, whatever. I think obviously in his texts, in the Bible, in the Quran, in the Torah, there's obviously like a man should not rest with a man as a man rests with a woman. There's obviously like outlines that homosexuality is not okay.
What about in terms of the way God has established his creation? If for instance, Alex, you were...
No, I don't agree.
You were born on a desert island.
Sure.
And there were a few number of people...
So is there a natural punishment to homosexuality?
No.
Yeah.
I'm simply asking...
Yeah.
Would you be able to look to the world that you live around?
Yeah.
Forget you being on a desert island,
Yeah.
but just being in a society.
Yeah.
Could you make certain inferences to the best explanation by looking at the natural order of events within society
Yeah.
and reach a reasonable assumption that, you know what?
Yeah.
If there is a God that exists, it seems like God wants us to be with the opposite sex rather than the same sex because of X, Y, and Z.
I disagree.
So therefore,
Yeah.
it seems like it is better
Yeah.
to be with the opposite sex rather than with the same sex.
I think better. So you're also asking if you assessed the environment in a controlled and isolated context, that you would derive that heterosexuality is more advantageous than homosexuality, and therefore it prescribes by the Creator's rule, as you inferred from their creation.
And therefore you could say tentatively that it's good?
I don't think technically that it's good. I would disagree. Because
Alex, can I ask you a question? Are you saying that because the cameras are on?
No, I'm not saying
okay,
that the cameras are on. I'm not saying that because I'm disagreeing, because humans are not the only homosexual animals. There's a lot of, like, I think every other, like penguins, they're the most homosexual animals. A penguin, two male penguins will, they will pick up eggs that have not been looked after, because they have to incubate the eggs and then they'll sit on them. They will sit on the eggs that if a mother can't look after them, and they'll take it and they'll foster and they'll adopt it. Lions, there's this pack of lions in Uganda that are all homosexual, and they rule.
But Alex,
they rule the kingdom.
No, but you know as well as I do that is an extreme exception to the rule.
It's not an extreme exception.
When the lions do this, they do it out of necessity.
They don't do it out of necessity.
They don't do it out of a biological imperative.
They do, because what about the Spartans, right? The Spartans.
No, I'm talking about the majority of the lions. I understand there may be a few lions who may end up doing this. There's even dingoes who do this as well.
Whoa.
Right? Why the dingo? Why the woe towards the dingoes?
I'm pulling it.
No.
Yeah.
But look, the point here is as follows, Alex.
Yeah.
There's if homosexuality was something that was in an innate part of a person, you would find, for instance, twins, and they've done this experiment already.
Yeah.
You would have biological identical twins who are brought up in the same environment.
Yeah, twin studies. I know about twin studies.
The twin studies, what they proved is that one turns out homosexual and the other turns out heterosexual.
Yeah.
But that's not possible, because if they were twins and it was inherently within them, it would be by necessity the case that they would either be one or the other.
No.
It wouldn't be possible for them to be.
That's not how gene expression works.
Oh well, no.
That's not, because
I'm not talking about the expression of the genes. I'm talking about the inherent nature of the person.
The only thing that science knows about what causes, so there's two things we know, and I could be wrong, but this is what I know to be true.
So the difference between genotype and the phenotype, right?
Yeah,
the expression,
phenotype is exactly.
The expression,
and then gene is what? So there's. I hate to break your heart, but I think we all have the gay gene. There is a gay gene. It's a collection of genes. But what makes someone actually active in their homosexuality is if it's turned on. Is if it's turned on.
Very, very good.
And then the second thing is that with men, so I'm one of 5 brothers and one mum, right? Different dads. And I'm the third born, so straight, and then my 2 younger brothers are gay. And what they think is that a mother, the more sons she has, the lower the birthing order, the more likely that'll be gay. And they go, well, why is that? Because they think, and I could be wrong, this is how science is, that it gets falsified, it gets checked, things could be that, whatever. But a cause of a gay child, of a son who it will turn out to be homosexual, is that the testosterone when they're in the womb is lesser than that someone who's straight. And then your question is, then why will someone who's lower, right, in the birthing order, have lower testosterone? It's because when a woman incubates a child, when she is pregnant, when she's in the 9-month period, she's low-key, like, as a human, it's because, like, the blood barrier between the baby and the human female is quite thin. So the transference of hormones is quite a lot, and that puts a massive toll on the woman. Because not only is she going through her hormones, which you need for birth, progesterone, estrogen, androgen, like all these things, she's also dealing with the baby's hormones. So the more children she has, the better her enzymes get at regulating the baby's hormones and creating this barrier. But what happens is that testosterone from that male child and her estrogen, it's like a push and pull sort of thing, right? And the better her push gets at, the more child she has. But what happens is it over pushes and has not destroy, but sort of limit that baby's testosterone, which then causes them to be gay, which causes that the more likely you are as a male on the birthing order, the more likely you are to be gay. And that's genetics.
Okay, so the more likely you are to be gay.
Yeah, homosexual.
Now, if you're brought up in a particular environment which actually encourages that, you're saying that because that precursor is already there within that individual, there's a higher chance of that person becoming homosexual.
Well, if the environment allows for it and is accepting of that nature, of course they're going to be more likely to express themselves if they are.
So therefore, if it wasn't the case, then the chances would probably be that they would still carry on the way normal, the way that the order of the world, which is that they would be attracted towards the opposite sex.
So you're
the
saying
argument,
that it's inherent, sexuality is inherent.
It's relative.
So you're saying it's inherent because if I was in an environment where it was okay to be gay and I was straight, I'd still be straight.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's prior to context, environment,
and it also and
nature.
Even if it is that case, it doesn't negate the fact that the vast majority of human beings are still.
The majority is heterosexual.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's all I'm trying to put across to you, Alex. It may be difficult for you to perhaps wrap your head around why.
Wrap my head around.
But yeah.
And I think nowadays you're seeing more gay people, and it's like a left-hand study. Nobody was left-handed until like the 1980s, because in school, before like the invention of the ballpoint pen, and you're using ink, left hand would smear the page. So they'd smack the hand, left hand, and you'd become ambidextrous and use your right hand. And now we have more tolerance to left-handed people. We don't really care, and you're seeing more left-handed people. That's why you're also seeing more gay people. Even the tolerance and acceptance is growing larger, allowing people who are already gay to be more gay, to be that.
Yeah, I understand. So left-handedness is an exception to the rule. Right-handedness is the dominant gene that establishes within human beings, because that's how do we know this?
We know people are right-handed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't even need to actually argue over this.
Oh,
listen. The point here is that, look, going back to the Islamic understanding, it's all about facilitating the natural order of things within the world and channeling that towards living your best version of yourselves. And we say that the only one who can actually determine that is not ourselves or a society, but God.
And this, I think it's been a great conversation. I think where we differ is where you see the exceptions to the rule, I see the majority and the minority. I don't think the majority, the people that are the majority of society, the people that follow the rule, not the exception, are the inherently moral people, are God's people, are people following. I just think they're the majority. I just think they're the majority of people.
I would say don't limit yourself to this time. If you extend this to humanity over the course of history, you'll find that what I'm saying is more applicable than what you're saying.
I don't agree with that.
No worries, we'll leave it there.
Alex,
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay.
Look after yourself.
But you have an Instagram?
No, I don't have an Instagram.
Oh, you need to you've got a million cameras filming you and you're not getting any clout off it. Come on. That was a great conversation.
Cheers, mate. Have a good one. Nice one.